You guys all have this guy on your team, the player that just completely gets outrageous, completely rages. Maybe they throw their equipment, maybe they get really aggressive, maybe they get really loud. But when they have a poor performance or they make a mistake, is that always the worst thing that you could do? Because there's guys in the big leagues who get really pissed off for a second or two. But in this video, we want to talk about how to bounce back from an error or a poor performance. So I'll start off by saying that there are guys that need to physically let go of the stress of whatever just happened. Now, are there productive ways and unproductive ways of doing that? Yes. Does throwing your helmet and smashing it against another player, is that productive? No, it's certainly not productive. Maybe you guys probably have those guys on your team. I know I always had those guys on my teams, but too often we want to tell that guy, no, like you got to act a certain way, but it doesn't allow him to get that frustration out. Now, he's not the only type. There's other guys that make mistakes. There's other guys that make errors. But I want to start off this video by saying each player is going to have their own specific way to let go of that poor performance or let go of that error. There's no one size fits all way to bounce back quickly. Would you agree?
I agree completely. In indie ball, we'd have guys who are raging out, and then other teammates would be, trying not to laugh, or at least laughing so they couldn't hear. So it's not the best for team chemistry as well when players are really getting out of control. But how do we allow, as coaches, and how do we explain the proper ways to vent a little, or to get our emotions out, or to experience those emotions? I think is key for a lot of athletes, to actually feel the emotion and then get rid of it, and then they can get their mindset back to where it needs to be, to inhale, exhale, Q word. But how do we release that without damaging equipment or without pissing off another teammate? Do you have any advice for that, Sam?
Yeah, it starts with practice. This is really something that they should be working on at practice. When something doesn't go their way at practice, there needs to be ways that they know how to process that information. There needs to be ways that they know how to deal with that themselves. Because the game is not the time to work on it. Just like you don't work on your swing or you don't work on different pitches in the game. I mean, periodically you got spring training and things like that. You can argue all the details you want, but I'm talking about in practice, you actually have to figure out what works for you. So instead of having a rep in practice and you just respond in a negative way where you can't bounce back, let's use that time as coaches and as players to figure out what works for you. So emotional intelligence, emotional control, this is both a topic that we're both very versed in, not to brag or anything like that, but this is something that we know and understand that has a very big impact on the way athletes perform. Daniel Goleman wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, and he concluded that there's nothing correlated more to success than emotional intelligence, not IQ, not test scores, not what their 60 time is or how hard they throw. It's emotional intelligence. And that doesn't mean someone that throws 65 is going to pitch in the big leagues. That's not what I'm saying. But it's about having an intelligence about our emotions, and it comes in a couple of factors. So changing what we see visually, changing the words that we're saying to ourselves, and the tone that we're saying it to ourselves. And that guy that's pissed off, that guy that's really frustrated that I started this video with, that guy's talking to himself like this, right? If he can learn how to change it, if he can learn that the way the tone affects him, then that has a different impact on his emotions. And then the fourth component of it is what you do with your body physically. So there's a corresponding feeling in your body, literally your nervous system running through your veins. There's a corresponding change when you feel a certain emotion. So it's about those four factors. And as a coach, how can you help those guys deal with those four factors? So each of us has a primary way of perceiving things. So some people are more visual, some people are more auditory, where they need to work on the auditory or the tone side of things, and some people are more kinesthetic. So as a coach, you've got to figure out what your guy is. Is he a visual guy? where you need to tell him something to help him visually. Hey, imagine what it's going to be like when you turn things around, or imagine what it's going to be like when you get on a roll. That's a visual cue. Or the auditory cue. I know you're big on self-talk. That's the guy that needs to change his inner dialogue. And then, like you talked about not only here, but on our last video about changing the physical side of things. I know I rambled on that for a little bit, but what else do you want to add?
Well, like you said, it starts in practice. So hopefully you're the type of team, the type of coach that is doing, having competitive practice where it doesn't even have to be, live at bats, batter versus pitcher. It can be the coach pitching, but you're playing a game or you're doing scenarios, first and second, lay this bunt down. And so it starts with being competitive and trying to outwork your teammates in practice where, players can then experience that emotion and then find out how to almost use it to their advantage instead of letting it hinder them. And I think for me, a big way is to, like I said, to experience that emotion and then try to get rid of it by a method. There's one method called treeing it that I truly believe in, where you experience the emotion and then you're going to take it from your body and then you can put it, away from the dugout or into the dugout, into your bat to give it positive energy, whatever. And then you can move on to that next pitch. And that's where the self-talk comes in for me with TNP, the next pitch. Okay, flush that mistake. Now I really need to move on to the next pitch. What can I do best to help my team and my teammates succeed?
Yeah, I mean, all the topics, obviously, we could talk for a long time on and go really in depth, but we're trying to give you the most relevant and most useful information right off the bat. So that's a good place to transition to our next video. But take into consideration all your guys need a different method for being able to bounce back. They need a different method for being able to deal with those errors. And like we both agree, it starts in practice. It's practice is not just about getting reps in physically, but it's also what we're teaching in this whole program is working on the mental side. So appreciate you guys. Stay strong.